Last time was the first meeting, I believe last month, and we studied about the first book in the History of Death series, which is the Genesis Genealogy. And I did an introduction of why genealogies are important, and because a lot of you were here before, I'm not going to go through that again, but I'm going to do a very short recap of the importance of the genealogy. And you might be wondering, wouldn't it be more fun to study about your name, Jesus' name, than to study the genealogies of the names that we do not really know and it's difficult to even pronounce? But one of the main reasons I mentioned last month, is that genealogies are written in the Bible in very important places. Very important places because those are the times when powers are changing or times were transitioning. And God wanted to make sure from the time of Adam until Jesus Christ, and from the time of Jesus until today, that this faith of the covenant is not lost. And so one of the main emphases that the History of Death series, the author of the books, Reverend Abraham Park, emphasizes again and again throughout the series is the importance of passing down this faith and the Word of God to the next generation. Making sure that this faith is not lost on the way, and making sure that there are people of faith waiting for the Lord at the first coming, and also we are waiting for Him at the second coming. Whether it be during our generation, or next generation, or the generation after that, God wants that covenant faith to be in His people, so that they can understand how to wait for Him, and so that they can be able to meet Him when He comes. So I pray that we may be the people that will meet Him when our Lord Jesus returns. Amen. So there are genealogies that we are going to mainly look at. And last time we looked at the genealogy in Genesis chapter 5, which is from Adam all the way to Noah. Today we're going to look at, mainly look at the Genesis chapter 11 genealogy, which runs from Noah, or his son Shem, all the way to Abraham. And when we get to the third book, study of the third book in the History of Death series, it starts the studies, it starts to discuss about Jesus' genealogy in Matthew chapter 1, which is in Matthew chapter 1, which goes from Abraham all the way to Jesus Christ. And so these three genealogies basically covers from Adam to Jesus. And not only are they lists of names and years, but they are telling us stories and events that have to do with God's work of redemption. And therefore, the importance of the genealogy is to show us how and to whom the will and the covenant, the Word of God was passed down. I did an example of Abraham. Abraham had how many sons? Does anybody know? Through Sarah, or through Hagar, he had one son. Through Sarah, he had Isaac. And later, after Sarah died, he had another wife, Keturah, and through her, he had 6 children. So altogether, he had 8, according to the Bible. But the 2 that we know well are Ishmael and Isaac. Which one is the firstborn? Ishmael. Do we understand the concept of the firstborn? Do you have in your culture the importance of the firstborn son? Yeah. So I trust that a lot of us Asians, especially, have that kind of culture behind it. But recently, I was very, very surprised because I was doing a study with an evangelist from China, and at first he did not understand this concept of the firstborn. Why? Because for many years they've only had one child. And so the firstborn importance was deleted from their culture. Do you understand? And so, but especially in the biblical culture, in the Bible, in the Old Testament and also the New Testament times, the firstborns were to receive the inheritance from the father, double the portions, double the blessings. But God does not follow that tradition in the Bible. Ishmael does not receive the blessing, rather Isaac does. He is the covenanted son. Isaac has two sons, Esau and Jacob. Once again, although they were twins, Esau was the son that came out first. However, Jacob takes the covenant. And so, genealogies allow us to trace where the covenant went. Because in the beginning, in Genesis chapter 3, verse 15, after Adam sinned, God pronounced, this woman will have offspring, seed, and serpent will have offspring, seed, and in the end, they will be in conflict with each other. Right? But the serpent, seed of the serpent, offspring of the serpent will bruise his heel, but the offspring of the woman will crush the serpent's offspring's head. Right? And so it's the competition between the two seeds. However, it is not only of simple biological tracing, it is a spiritual and covenantal tracing. And so sometimes when you look through these genealogies, some of the generations are skipped. But for example, let's say there's a generation, and there's in order B, C, D. But then the Bible skips these two generations, for example, and then says A begot D, which means A became the father of D. Do you understand what that means? The A is actually dad, grandpa, great-grandfather of D. But the Bible says A fathered D. A became the father of D. So, biblical concept of becoming a father and son relationship is when A passes down, B failed to inherit that faith. C failed to inherit the faith. D somehow comes along and inherits the faith of A. A becomes the father of D. Do you get this concept? So, the genealogy is showing us where did the covenant go and follow. Another importance in the genealogy, I made it easy for you to answer this question. Who are the most important people in Genesis chapter 5 genealogy? You only see two names there. Which ones? Adam and Noah. What about Genesis chapter 11 genealogy? Who are the important people? Noah and Shem and Abraham. What about in Matthew chapter 1 genealogy? Who's the important ones? Abraham, and in the middle is David and Jesus Christ. Usually, when God allows the biblical authors to write these genealogies, we can see that God is emphasizing the importance of the first person in the genealogy, because he's the one that passes down, right? The first baton is important in a relay. And who's the next, the more important one? The last one that carries the baton. in a relay, you know what relay race is. There are usually 4 runners. Who is the fastest runner? The first one, second one, third one, or fourth one? It needs to be the fourth one, the last one. Even if the first 3 mess up a little bit, the fourth one needs to catch up, right? Usually in the genealogy, the main focus is in the last person. So last time we talked about Noah a little bit. How did Adam's faith and repentance affect Noah? Because we studied about the calculations of the generations. Noah has not had the chance to meet Adam. Noah has not had a chance to meet Enoch. How did he have faith? Right? Because during that time we know many people were not believing in God. Remember, God judged the people during that time? So faith was a very difficult thing to keep and preserve during that time. But Noah was a man of God. God said lameness in his eyes. How did he receive that kind of faith? And then what we need to ask is, how do we inherit that faith? Because after this genealogy that leads to Jesus, there needs to be a genealogy that goes from Jesus Christ to fill in the blank. This is the genealogy that we are most interested in. Why? Because the last one has to be me, you. How are we related to Jesus Christ, and how do we become children of Jesus Christ? Because biologically, racially, in any other way, there's no way. But do you believe that Jesus is your Father? God is your Father? Do you believe that we are children of Jesus Christ? How? Prove it. Blood tests cannot prove it. Right? Our genealogy cannot prove it. My surname, last name cannot prove it. So, how? So that is what this History of Redemption series is trying to do. Connect us to Jesus Christ and all the way to the beginning, so that we know how important we are and what a great task is given to us, so that we can pass down and continue this genealogy until the end. And so, in this first genealogy, Noah was a great important person. We learned how Noah was taught by his father Lamech and his great grandfather Methuselah. Today we're going to think a little bit more about Noah. But right before we get into the story of Noah, I'd like to remind you one more thing. Since the fall of Adam, he was kicked out of the Garden of Eden. Adam was there, and God was there, right? And there was perfect peace and rest, Sabbath. And when Adam committed sin, committing sin against God was rejecting His word. And by rejecting His word, it means he disobeyed, did not follow God's word, but rather followed and obeyed the words that originated from the serpent, from Satan. And so rejected God's word and took in the other kind of message. And as a result, man was lost, fallen. The perfect Sabbath was destroyed, broken. And the Garden of Eden, Adam was kicked out from the Garden of Eden, which we know as paradise on this earth. In a different way, it's all about God dwelling with man. That's why Jesus came down. John chapter 1 verse 14 tells us the Word, Jesus, became flesh and came and dwelt among His people. God wants to live with us. But in order for God to live with us, the man has to uphold the word, sovereignty. But when that is broken, they cannot dwell together. And dwelling together gives us life. But in order to dwell together, there needs to be a concept of place or dwelling. Where are we going to live with God? And which represents and foreshadows the kingdom of heaven. But on this earth, it is the temple. Temple or tabernacle. And so throughout the history of redemption, throughout the history of the Bible, God is very, very attached to a certain dwelling place of each time period. In the Garden of Eden, during the time of Adam, it was the Garden of Eden. During the time of Noah, God told him to build the ark. During the time of Abraham, it was the tent. For Hebrews chapter 11 tells us clearly, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob dwelt in tent together. It was a place of worship and sharing the word. During the time of Moses, of the Israelites in the wilderness, it was the tabernacle. And during the time of King David and Solomon, it was the temple. And it continues on to Jesus' time. And Jesus says, my body is the temple. And after Jesus left, through Apostle Paul, he told us the church is Jesus' body. And even our body, our body, our family is the dwelling place of the Holy Spirit. And therefore, our interest is, how do we live with God? How do we come to a place where we end up living eternally with God? And that message is given through the building projects of these places and buildings and temples. And today, and that's why throughout the Bible, God tells us how long did it take to build this ark, this tent, to establish faith in the tent, tabernacle, temple, and Jesus said, destroy that temple, I will raise it up in 3 days. He talked about the duration of rebuilding the temple, right? And then our greatest interest is the final temple will be the New Jerusalem, right? Okay. How long can be not only the duration of construction, but how long do we need to wait? Is a big question that we are asking. How long do we need to wait for the New Jerusalem? If you're expecting for me to give you an answer, you're wrong. Because nobody knows. But we can get hints from the Bible, not about what year, what month, and what day, but how do we prepare? So today we can learn from Noah's Ark. God told Noah to build the ark. When he first told Noah to build the ark, God said, build, in the Hebrew language, directly translated, it means build a big box. Like a casket. Like an ark. Ark of the Covenant. You know, Ark of the Covenant is like a small box, wooden box. God did not say build a ship or boat. God said build an ark, build a box. And if you read carefully, God only says, because the people are so corrupt, I'm going to destroy them. God does not tell him how he will do it. Later on he does, but he tells him to build a box first. When God tells us to do something so random and weird, what's our reaction first? We chaos people have to know, what am I doing? How long will it take? God did not say, I give you how many years. God said, just build it. And later he says, I'm going to send a flood. And Noah probably got an idea. Oh, this box is supposed to float. Right? This huge box that should contain all the living beings, living things. And so, how long did it take for Noah to build that ark? And what kind of effort and faith did it require Noah to build that ark? That's not the only thing God told him to do. You know, Noah's time, they didn't have electrical saw or cranes and all those things, right? To build an ark that is the size of a football field, right? Where does he find the wood that is big enough? Okay. How does he transport the wood? And how many people did he have? How many people did he have? Including himself? 8. Maybe Methuselah was alive, Lamech was alive, but they were old. 800, 900 years old. So I don't know if they were able to help, but he had his 3 sons, his wife, and his 3 sons' wives. So out of the 7 people, other than himself, 4 were women. Nothing against women. But had to build a huge ark. And God, on top of that, says, and prepare food for all the animals to eat while you're in the ark. Prepare food for who? For rhinoceros, elephants, tigers, lions. For how many? For how long? To eat for how long? They were in the ark for how long? Close to 1 year. Imagine trying to buy food for just your household, your family, to survive for 1 year. I would have to buy the whole market. For all these animals to eat, so they did not only have to do full-time work in building the ark, they had to somehow find another full-time work in farming and preparing the food. Do you think, have you ever complained, doing church work is so demanding. I have to do my full-time work at my job or my business, and then it seems like my pastor is requiring full-time service at church. You said that, right? Don't raise your hand. Think about Noah. But God counts every hour and every effort that you have put into doing His work. Amen. So how long did it take Noah to build the ark? We will take a look. Because this can be a little bit controversial. How long was the ark construction? By the way, this image of the ark is not very biblical. Okay? It's supposed to look like a big box. Okay? How long did it take? Genesis chapter 7 verse 6. Now Noah was 600 years old when the flood of the water came upon the earth. So that is one thing that the Bible tells us is very accurate. So we go by the standard of Noah's age. Okay? The flood came when Noah was 600 years old. Genesis chapter 7 verse 11 also tells us the same thing. In the 600th of year of Noah's life, in the 2nd month, the 17th day of the month, okay, the flood began. But many of us and many scholars, biblical scholars, there are generally two groups of scholars who, in regards to how many years it took. One group is the group that says 120 years because of this verse. Genesis 6:3, it says, Then the Lord said, My spirit shall not strive with man forever, because he also is flesh. Nevertheless, his days shall be 120 years. And so this is God making a judgment sentence upon the people. We don't exactly know at what point God made this judgment, but these scholars take it as, okay, from this time forth, you have 120 years before you're dead, basically. They interpret it this way. It can also be interpreted that general longevity will be reduced eventually, because during that time people were living 900 something years in average. And for them, 120 is a very short time. So there are two groups of scholars, biblical scholars, and some say this is not speaking about that from that point all the way to the judgment. And even if it was, that is not necessarily the time of construction, the actual construction of the ark. Okay. And so it is a little bit vague to say Noah built the ark for 120 years because of this verse alone. Because there are other places in the Bible that tell us other things. Okay? This passage from Genesis chapter 6, verse 10 through 14. It says, Noah became the father of 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. It continues on in verse 13. It says, Then God said to Noah. Okay? So Noah had 3 sons first, before God spoke to Noah. The end of all flesh has come before me, for the earth is filled with violence because of them, and behold, I am about to destroy them with the earth. Verse 14. Then God said, Make for yourself an ark of gopher wood. You shall make the ark, and then it continues on to say, God says, your children, 3 sons, and your 3 daughters-in-law will go in. So that means his 3 daughters-in-law were already there. Apologize for that. Now this is Hebrew. This is the original text. The Old Testament was written in, and this is basically verses 9 through 13 that we just read. And you can see this red line that is supposed to look like it is Hebrew alphabet, 6th alphabet, Vav. Originally pronounced as wow. Shall we practice?
Wow.
Wow. But after after time passed by, a lot of Jews lived in the Germany area and started to speak German, and you call them Yiddish Jews, Yiddish. And according to the Yiddish pronunciation, wow became Vav. Because W is pronounced in German, Vav, like B. And so, anyway, this Vav it means and, or then. When you continue a sentence, you say and or then, especially when you're telling a story in sequence. And these Vav usages are interpreted, or there are many different Vav usages, or wow usages. And this is called wow consecutive. And there are some different usages of wow consecutive, but when it happens like 1, 2, 3, continuously, consecutively, in telling a story, it has, when the Jews read this in their original language, they don't have to be explained. It means this event, these sentences happened in sequential order. So it is not God prophesying or whatever. God is saying this in order of time. Okay? And so verses 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, God continues to begin with this wow. And then. Okay? So let us read that passage once again. Genesis chapter, what chapter was it? 6, verse 10 and the following. It says, Noah became the father of 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. It says in English, now the earth, right? It's wow. It's wow consecutive. And now the earth was corrupt in the sight of God, and the earth was filled with violence. Again, verse 12 begins with wow. And then God lived on the earth, right? And then verse 13 it says then. That's wow again, right? So many wows. Then, wow, God said to Noah, the end of all flesh has come. And verse 14, again, it says in the original language, wow. Okay, wow. Then God said to Noah, make for yourself an ark of gopher wood, and so on. Verse 15, again, then, this is how you shall make it. It continues on, you shall make a window, and so on. And he continues on, even when it says verse 18, but, that's wow. I will establish my covenant and with you, and you shall enter the ark, you and your sons and your wives and your sons' wives with you. So if this is sequentially in order, what happened first? Noah had his sons first. And then God saw the world is wicked and he needs to judge. So God tells Noah, I'm going to judge the world. You make the ark. This is God's command, first command to Noah to build the ark. Okay? And then he says, your sons and your sons' wives will go in. So that means your sons' wives, sons are already married or not? The sons are already married. How old do you have to be married? Anybody know the average age for marriage back then? I don't know, probably young, I don't know. Let's give it the least possible, smallest possible, youngest possible age. So it says, Noah was 500 years old, and Noah became the father of Shem, Ham, and Japheth. So basically it's saying, it was after Noah was 500 years old that he had his 3 sons. Right? Are you doing the calculation already? Really? Because Noah's age at 500, flood came at 600. Noah had 3 sons after he was 500. Exactly how old was he when he had his first son? These are the records of the generations of Shem. Shem was 100 years old and became the father of Arpachshad 2 years after the flood. So 2 years after the flood is when Noah was 602. You understand, right? Okay. I don't want to lose you, but I think you're smarter than myself. So 602 is when Shem was how many years old? 100. So when the flood ended, flood began. When the flood was there, how old was Shem? He was 100 years old, 2 years after the flood, and therefore during the flood he was 98 years old. Okay? He was 98 years old. That means when Noah was 600, Shem was 98. When did Noah have Shem? 502. Right? Exactly from the Bible. Okay. Shem's birth was when Noah was 502 years old. Let's say So in order to give maximum possible duration for the construction of the ark, we have to reduce as much as possible the gap in between. Let's say, for the sake of argument, Noah had Shem, Ham, and Japheth. You cannot have, unless they're twins, kids before 1 year after the first kid, right? Cannot, right? Maybe 10 months. So let's give them 1 year in between. Okay? So Noah was 504 when he had Ham and Japheth, all three sons. Minimum age for getting them married. They have to be men at least to be married. And so let's give them 15 years of age. We're trying to give them as little as possible so that we can get a maximum number of years for the construction of the ark. Even if he got married at the age of 15, all three sons have to get married. So 517 is when Shem was 15 years of age. Let's say they got married 1 year after another. 519 would be the shortest time needed for his, in our imagination and in our calculation, for Noah to have had his three sons and for his three sons to have had gotten married. What's the duration in between then? It was after Noah had his three sons and three daughters-in-law that God said, you start building the ark. Time of construction? Anywhere between, maximum we can give, I think it's more like 79 or 80, but maximum we can give is 81 years. So I would say, 70 or 80 years of constructing the ark. Does that make the ark or Noah's work any smaller or lesser? No. Have you ever tried to work on one project for 70 years? And biblically, from the Hebraic point of view, about 70 years is more acceptable, because 7 is a very common, and those of you who are coming to our daytime studies, we are studying book 4, and last week I think I shared about the duration of the construction of Solomon's temple, and even that, how many years? Anybody want to figure? 7 years in constructing the temple. Okay? So, very meaningful. Why are we studying this? One is, this is an example of how we want to read the Bible more accurately. To understand what God is trying to say. And also, this may, in the future, help us in understanding the duration of constructing the ark, constructing God's temple, and the place where we can live with God. Because this is important, because Jesus said in Matthew chapter 24, verse 37 and 38, Jesus said, the coming of the Son of Man, which is referring to the second coming, will be like the days of Noah. And I believe that we need to have faith like Noah to establish the spiritual ark. And what is that ark? I believe, number one, it is your body, our body. Secondly, I believe it is your family. Where God dwells and God uses for His work of salvation. For the people who perished, ark was not salvation, but for Noah and his family, the ark was the means of salvation. And I pray that God will dwell in your house, so that your house will become the ark where you can be saved in the end time. And furthermore, your church. And we are praying that Singapore, a nation, can become the ark of the end time, where we can call in all the peoples, all the creatures to be saved in the end time. So that faith of Noah is very important. And just to give you, before we go into break, just to give you a little interesting snippet of the Jewish writings. Last time I shared a little bit about the Jewish writings. Once again, this is just for your interest, not saying this is the truth from the Bible, because we only consider the 66 books of the Bible as the right canon and the authority, the writings of authority that have God's Spirit and written by God. But there are Jewish writings that help us kind of understand the Bible. The question is, how did Noah find wisdom to build the ark? Wisdom and faith to build the ark. Because you know the instructions that God gave. Do you think with those instructions you can build a big box that will float and save your life? I don't think I can. I mean, God said build it with gopher wood, but He never told him how to sand the gopher wood or cut it or connect each thing, where to nail it down, right? Many things that God did not tell him. What about? So the answer is in that writing. Noah was given a book called Torah. You're thinking Torah is from Moses, not from the time of Noah. But the Jewish people during that time, the rabbis believed, Moses wrote the book of the law. The word Torah does not mean law. Torah comes from the Hebrew word yara, which means to call and to teach. So basically this book was the teachings from Adam. Adam started to teach, right? And that book was passed down to important descendants. It was passed down to Elijah, passed down to Noah. And so basically the teaching, the lesson is not a magical book, but Noah received the teachings of God's Word. And the Word of God gave him wisdom. And guess where that book went? According to that story. That book was given from Noah to Abraham. And in the second hour, we will take a look at how that must have happened. And the story goes on. Noah and Abraham took the book and gave it to. You want to take a wild guess? Down the generations, and it coincides with the genealogies that we are studying. And eventually, it's given to David, and David gives it to Solomon, who, from reading and studying the Word of God, receives all that wisdom. Solomon is the one that is blessed with wisdom, right? And with that wisdom, from David and from the Word of God, Solomon builds the temple. Sounds like Aesop's fable, right? But one lesson personally I learned from that, is not trying to look for, like Indiana Jones look for a lost book. But it's the Word of God that gives us wisdom. It's those who receive the Word of God. Now it's the real Bible. The Bible. You don't have to go look for it somewhere else and Petra or whatever. You can go to your room and open the Bible and there's the book. And those who receive that word and receive that teaching will be given that special wisdom. Amen?
Amen.
And so, your children, if you have children, especially the younger ones, let them study the Word of God. I believe that God will give them special wisdom that when they grow up, they will become important people, not only in the church, but for the country and for the world also. God has to give that special wisdom. And in the end, it is those who receive that wisdom that will take part in building the kingdom of God. Building up the kingdom of God. We study about these constructions of temples and ark because we are, in a way, participating in building up that house, what we call the kingdom of God, the ultimate house in the end. And so I pray that we may receive that wisdom, that we may become the ones that will inherit the teachings of God. Amen?